I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. The customer experience often feels like a series of accidental encounters, but Jeannie Walters argues it is actually the ultimate competitive lever. With over 20 years of experience helping brands like JPMorgan Chase and SAP, she moves beyond vague buzzwords to show how leaders can intentionally design every moment of the journey. Her new book, Experience is Everything, reveals why experience is the only sustainable way to boost revenue and outpace the competition in a crowded market. My interview with Jeannie is coming right up, but first, Jeannie Walters, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much, Nick. I'm so thrilled to be here with you.
You know, we have known each other for quite a while and, 610 episodes, and we've never chatted here. So I am thrilled
Well,
because, as your book title so aptly puts it, experience is everything.
there
But,
you go.
but because it's everything, I feel like sometimes people that aren't maybe in the experience trenches can get overwhelmed by that. Wow, it's almost so important. Where do you start? So how do you, one, give folks some baby steps to make it a little less scary?
hmm It's a great question because part of why I wrote this book was because I'm working with leaders in all sorts of different organizations. And so many of them are being tasked with things like, hey, chief marketing officer, guess what? You're in charge of customer experience now, right? Like, way to go. Or they kind of came up through that contact center, customer service, customer response area. And then they're told, well, we should be doing more, shouldn't we? And we should be tracking these metrics, but they're not given really a toolkit or a playbook. And I really believe that one of the biggest things we're missing is alignment and treating this like any other part of the business. So what I try to do is break that down into, you know what, where do you start? You start with the mindset, but that's not enough. That's where a lot of folks stop. You've got to have a strategy and you've got to have that discipline. So really it's about walking through those three ideas in a way that is accessible to people.
So to talk, you talked a bit about kind of why you wrote the book,
Mhm.
but it's also something that, as you've been working in the experience trenches for so long, with so much change. What made you think now is the time I need to tackle this big project?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because there are times I'm like, wow, I should have written this book 20 years ago, right? And then I'm like, I couldn't have written it 20 years ago because I didn't see everything that I've seen in that world. I think we've been talking about customer experience now for about 2 decades plus. There are still places that I go where when I say I do customer experience work, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So we still have a long way to go, but I think that there's been a lot of talk. And there was a lot of talk in the beginning about, hey, if you're just nice to customers, magic things will happen. And then the pendulum swung way over to, okay, if we just track metrics of how people are feeling, amazing things will happen. And I kept seeing over and over the same mistakes. And so it felt like, right now we're in this world of AI and all this amazing technology. But you and I both know you can't just plug it in and kind of hope for the best.
Yeah.
You have to have a real strategy behind it. And that's the piece that I thought, you know what, if we get that right now in this moment, we have a much better chance of success with all of these new things that we're facing and how fast the world is moving right now with innovation.
Well, and to your point, so many of those like shorthand things, and then magic will happen. I feel
Mhm.
like, yeah, there's kind of a magic beans thinking
Yes.
with experience, because back to the book title again, experience feels like everything.
Mhm.
We're often looking for a quick thing to check off of a
Right.
list. Is it these is it these metrics? Is it just
Mhm.
training of frontline staff? but it's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So you're saying that to kind of get one's arms around all of those things, that it all kind of ladders up or back to the strategy around experience.
Mhm.
Is that
Mhm.
a separate um, strategy document than maybe one's brand strategy as
Mhm.
well, or is there an overlay or?
There's definitely overlap, right? Like, and if not, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because, we use a couple of things because when we talk about we have to align the mindset, for instance, a lot of people say things like, "Well, yeah, but we know we're customer first, like we got it. We checked the box." But we have to let people know what that means for our brand. And that means we have to start with what is the brand promise? Let's make sure we understand that. Let's make sure we understand the expectations we're setting. How should that show up in the experience? And how do we give people the tools and the behaviors and the expectations that so that they know how to show up with that? So that's the first step. And then the second part is the strategy, because if we were just doing this for being nice to customers, customers would be like, "Cool, give me your products for free and 24/7 everything." And we can't do that. That's not why we're in business. So the strategy, we use something called a CX success blueprint. And that is where we literally map out what is this going to do for the organization? Like, what are the top organizational goals? What do the leaders actually care about? Because you and I both know your CMO thinks differently than your CFO. And then how do you actually plan on, what levers to pull in experience that will benefit the company and benefit the customers? And how do you measure that success? Because we can't just rely on feedback. Feedback is really important, but humans make no sense, right? We say one thing and we do something completely different. And so if we're not looking at how are they actually behaving and what are the operational metrics telling us, then we're missing the opportunity to really show the value of this and to earn the value of it, to earn the return on the investment that we're making into the customer experience. So it's so much more part of the business than people give it credit for. And one of the examples I always talk about is like, you would never have a sales team who their goal was sell stuff. Like that was it. But we do that all the time to customer experience teams. And then when they don't quite follow through because nobody actually defined what success looks like, they're I've seen leaders go, "Well, I guess this isn't really working. Let's get rid of the CX team." And it's like, no, it's your customers are having an experience whether you talk about it or not. And so why not be intentional and proactive about it to get the results that you want, just like any other part of business?
I like how you kind of started that with what does this look like in your organization, and you've done a lot of work with highly regulated industries, finance, healthcare. What's kind of one of the biggest myths that leaders believe when it comes to? Because a lot of times I feel like when you get into regulated industries, you've got the or even on the with B2B brands
Mhm.
or both, there's the oh womp womp sad trombone, we can't do the cool
Yes.
innovative stuff when it comes to experience.
Mhm.
But you've proven otherwise. So what how do you get over some of those what feel like some pretty significant hurdles?
Yeah. It's a great, great question. And I feel like you and I have talked to the same B2B and regulated people because I've heard that same sad trombone. But really, I think number one, if you look at who has succeeded in the last couple of decades, who has disrupted, it's all been experience based. It's not really about developing the new widget. It's about how do you help people do whatever they're going to do with that thing that you're selling? And how do you do it in a more seamless, convenient, effortless way? How do you do it with a little more delight? And so when we look at it that way, you can think about in these regulated industries, there's such a sense of complacency, I think, like this is just the way our industry does it.
Mhm.
And when you hear that, you're basically saying, we're not going to try so hard for the customer. And if you're not trying to disrupt your industry, someone else is. So if you are not the disruptor, you will be the disrupted. So that's really the approach that I try to look at. And there are always things you can do. One of my favorite examples is a bank that I worked with here in Chicago. They were on the south side of Chicago. Incredible, incredible organization. They had a triple bottom line. So they had their regular bottom line, a sustainability objective, and then community development was a huge part of their mission. And one of the things they ran into was that they were trying to hire within their community, but the FDIC says you can't have a felony on your record in order to work in an FDIC regulated organization. And the head of HR lobbied the FDIC and said, in the neighborhood I'm in, a lot of young people have felonies on their record who have served their time. They've done what they need to. And now we want to develop our community in this way. And she was able to get that. And it made a huge difference in the lives of these people and in the way that they were able to serve their community. And so I think when you're deciding to be complacent because you're in regulated industries or you have compliance issues or all those things, you're not really challenging the status quo in a way that you possibly could. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody, but we have to try new things like that. We have to get creative, and that will help us deliver on the mission of our organization and for the customers that we serve.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. That's such a great example. And I feel like, when it comes to experience, back to we're looking for easy stuff to check off the list, lobbying the FDIC
Right.
for a change is not an easy thing. But again, it speaks to that idea of, instead of the sad trombone, looking at how could we do things differently. And what I really think is unique about that, because you could feel like we are in the finance industry with FDIC regulations, but really we're in community banking, and
That's right.
a key differentiator is being of our community. So once you said it, I couldn't kind of unsee how important this is to not just the brand strategy, but the overall mission vision of the org.
Well, and that's exactly why when we talk about aligning the mindset, we get really into, how do we show up no matter what? That's really the question we're trying to answer. And it's really not about the products and services. It's about who we are to our customers. And we use something called a customer experience mission statement to do that, because then it empowers people, just like that leader I was talking about, to say, what could I do to live up to this? How do we make sure we're doing that? And it's a great question as you're evaluating the customer journey and the customer experience too. Did we live up to this mission or not? And if the answer is or not, that's a great exercise to dig into and say, okay, why not? What could we do differently next time? How can we make sure that we do this? And I think that right now, a lot of customer experience leaders are stuck in this place where they're just reacting to all the little things coming at them every day. And I want to empower leaders to really think differently about this and lead differently. And I think understanding the customer experience mission and how that ties in your brand promise and how that shows up for your community, it really, really matters. And we have to give people the tools to do that.
So your new book discusses making experience a competitive advantage. And one question when I'm talking about brand experience that I get a lot, that in fact I got last night when I was speaking to the Boston University School of Hospitality Management, and they're working with, restaurant clients, and shout out to Jonathan Katz and the other folks. They're doing great work. But I literally got the question about experience. You hear all about finding these memorable moments. And one of the student groups asked, how do you find a moment that you can amplify, that you can make something uh, bigger than expected out of?
Hmm.
How do you kind of make sense of the multitudinous touch points that
Hmm.
organizations have online and off?
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a two-sided question because one of the things that I hear a lot is people say, "Oh yeah, you've got to wow everybody all the time." And I'm like, "No, you really don't. You've got to get the basics right." Number 1. But then number 2, I look at what I call micro moments, which are these moments that can easily be neglected. But if you turn up the volume on them a little bit, they make a big difference. And years ago, I was ordering Halloween costumes for my kids. And I was online. I'm sure I was late. I'm sure it was like
Yeah.
October 15th, right? And I'm like, oh no. And I found this place, I think it was halloweencostumes.com or something very straightforward. So I found what I needed, I ordered it, and then they sent this video to me, and I will never forget it because it was a generic video, but they were basically playing to the camera and they said, "Okay, we've got your order." And then you saw the warehouse and you saw the people like hand off the order and reach in and say, "Okay, we've got it in the inventory. It's coming your way." And it was so reassuring in that moment. And I think there are moments like that where our customers are experiencing anxiety of some sort. And if we can look for moments where we could give them a little reassurance proactively, that goes so far. But we miss those opportunities because we think, well, we've confirmed, we've done these things. But if I'm sitting on the other end thinking, will these Halloween costumes arrive on time?
Mhm.
And they make that video and they make that promise, suddenly that relieves all that anxiety for me as a customer. And so I think when we look for moments in the journey, that's one of the things I always recommend. Look for moments where you can proactively reassure, and that will make a world of difference in how a customer feels about their experience with you.
You talk about those micro moments, and as you were saying that, I feel like I experienced another one myself. Like many of us that run around, do a lot of speaking, talking about all of this on my feet a lot,
Yes.
and my feet are a little irregular. I have a high arch. I supinate, and I've been through several pairs, tried lots of different things, but I found a new kind of minimalist shoe online that looks appropriate for the circumstances I need to be in, and I ordered it. It's called from a company called Birchberry, and immediately after ordering, or shortly thereafter, I got an email. You know, from the CEO, but obviously a drip campaign for someone that's just ordered, but it really fit the part because it was written very personally, and it was, here's why I founded this company. I'm someone that
Mhm.
loves the comfort of flip-flops, but I realized grown up I needed to wear regular shoes, and that's kind of me. I love
Mhm.
flip-flop, and it really did exactly what you said about those Halloween costumes. It reduced, I mean, I've not gotten the shoes yet. I don't know that they'll work, but I feel good about it.
Yes. Yes. And I think that we look for moments sometimes right now where we want to make a big splash. And really, what I like to focus on, how can we build more trust? And I talk sometimes about the emotional bank, right? Like we have to make sure that we are over indexing on those positive moments because things will go wrong and that's okay as long as you have enough in that emotional bank. Because when it's time to make that withdrawal, you need to make sure you have enough deposits.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of organizations just miss opportunities to really provide a little moment of positivity, a little more than you expect. And that's what really earns that credibility and trust.
I really like that metaphor of an emotional bank because as you were saying that, I feel like we've got all sorts of different kinds of metrics that we look at,
Mhm.
many not as useful as we often think that they are. But it almost is, we talk about mapping the customer journey. I
Mhm.
sort of feel like there's almost an emotional map that you
Absolutely.
could put together to look for some of these windows that might have an outsized impact. Is that anything that
Yeah.
you work through?
Definitely. I mean, part of what our approach to customer journey mapping is including the emotional highs and lows. But even better than that is when I talk about being intentional and proactive with your customer experience, a lot of that is figuring out what are the emotions that we want to elicit? What are the things that we want to deliver? And how do we design around that? Because I think right now we are living in a world where people are not trustful. They don't necessarily trust brands. They don't trust what they read. And because we're living in this world of kind of cynicism,
Yeah.
I think we really have to work hard to be very proactive about what is that emotion that we're trying to get to. So I've talked about reassurance. Sometimes I talk about how there are certain words that we as customers use that are actually pretty complicated words. And one is frustrated.
Mm.
My definition of frustrated is anger with loss of control. So when somebody says frustrated as a customer, I'm very frustrated. What they're saying is, I don't feel like I have any agency here. I feel like things are happening around me, to me, about me, but I can't do anything about it. So, how in that moment can we give them a sense of control? How can we give them a sense of empowerment? So, I think part of this is looking at what is the opposite of what they're saying when it's negative and how can we get there with them? How can we make sure that we're delivering on that? So it's like I named my company Experience Investigators because I love investigating all this and I love getting into the weeds, but you really do have to. You have to think about who are these people? Who are we to these people as a brand? And what are the emotions that are happening? And people are complex, right? So we have to understand not only their emotions, but how can we empower the people delivering these experiences so that they don't get burned out, so that they have enough empathy. So it's this wonderful puzzle that we have to put together. And it can be overwhelming, but at the same time, if we are so overwhelmed we're not doing anything, that's not serving anyone. So I always say just like start where you can.
Well said. I recognize that we are close to wrapping up, but I'm going to toss a big, ugly, far-flung question your
Love
way
it.
because you talk about empathy and people, and such a big part of the experience is what our people are delivering. And I
Mhm.
think especially in an AI driven customer experience
Yep.
world, that is another area that can have outsized impact. But back to that, beleaguered CMO or marketing director that is all of a sudden, hey, you're in charge of experience. And they're used to being in charge of marketing, and all of a sudden, they might need to connect some dots when it comes to people.
Mhm.
What's the advice there as something that maybe traditionally hasn't been in a marketing job description?
Mhm. It is a big question, Nick.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But I think one thing that I like to remember about empathy is it is a finite resource. When we are starting the day, we have more empathy than at the end of the day. So, wherever we are in the journey with our customers, I think it's really important to recognize that we are also human in those moments. And we have to kind of store up our resources and make sure that we have the right support. So, if I were that CMO, one of the things I would do is look at who are the people who are delivering and get really close to them. So, one of the things that drives me nuts right now is I see all these customer experience dashboards and they have these beautiful pie graphs and these beautiful, things going up and down,
Looks
red and
great.
green, right? I mean, and people get very excited or not about the numbers. But when you see that time and time and time again, you're losing the connection with the human at the end of it. And so one of the things I always recommend is have one piece of humanity on your dashboard. And that could be a recording from your contact center. That could be a video that a customer sends in. That could be a quote. That could be something that you heard from one of those frontline people. Because the more that you can elicit that, then like nobody was ever moved emotionally by a pie chart. And so we need to like move people. And so I think it's really important to constantly balance, yes, what's in it for the organization. We need to make sure we're getting return on investment and all those important things.
Yeah.
And let's not lose that sense of humanity and who we are and that emotional connection, because that's what moves us to actually take the actions that we need to take.
I love that bit of advice. Both of those you said before, start where you can, and including something human amidst all of the red and green pie charts.
Yeah.
So I've smiled many times throughout this conversation. I've even mentioned a brand that made me smile because of their experience. Shout out to Birchberry Shoes. Jeannie, what's a brand that's made you smile recently?
Well, I think it's really interesting right now to think about not only how are we serving our customers, but how are we serving our communities, our greater communities. So I mentioned that bank, which always impressed me, but right now I'm really fascinated by a move that Costco is making right now. And that is that, you know, they're well known for a very consistent customer experience. They have very loyal customers. They are known for treating their employees well, all of these things. Well, there's a housing crisis right now in California. And so one of the things they decided to do was their next warehouse that they're building there, they're building apartments on top. And part of it is to provide a community where maybe there isn't one. They're providing housing, they're providing more jobs, all of those things. But they're investing in the area, not just their customers. And I'm really intrigued by that because I think we're in a moment in time where we're going to have more crises like that. We're going to have more things come up that we have to address as a society. And if we can have leaders in the corporate environment and in retail step forward and say, we're going to be a part of this, I think not only will that be good for the community, but customers are going to really like that too. And they're going to have this wonderful virtuous cycle of loyalty. And I'm very intrigued by that right now. That's making me smile.
I love that. That's so interesting. And Costco, just in general, is such a great brand to talk about, but especially when we're talking about experience, because one might think, you know, we talked about the sad trombone on finance healthcare, something that's essentially like a warehouse business. You could have had the sad no, it's no frills. There's nothing special here, but they've found a way to do just the opposite.
Yeah.
Jeannie, where can we send folks to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I am on LinkedIn very much, so that's always a good way to do that. And then Experience Investigators is my company.com. If you want to find out about the book, experienceiseverythingbook.com. We have some fun events coming up for that too. So I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Jeannie Walters, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you so much, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.